good morning back. I'll start again, actually. Good morning, everyone. Thank you. So glad you're able to join us for the second day of Menus of Change. We've got a very full, packed day for you this morning, so we'll just dive right into it. I wanted to start by thanking our sponsors, Heinemann and Cisco, for the lovely breakfast downstairs. Hope you enjoyed that. Just a reminder also that all the meal recipes will be sent out after the conference. So if you really enjoyed something today at breakfast, yesterday at the reception, anytime later on today, you're going to get recipes for all of those items after the conference. The other thing to remind you is download the app. Another plug for the app. It's got the schedule, presenter bios, all sorts of goodies in there, including a new feature that we introduced this year, an MOC workbook. You'll see it just gives you a couple of prompts. There are no wrong answers. Prompts for you to record as you're going along this experience, your insights and takeaways to better reinforce these learnings for you and for you to go back and look at. So I encourage you to take a look in the MOC workbook. You'll see that there are certain prompts. It'll tell you to stop at a certain point and wait until you've had more amazing experiences before you come back and record those. So please do visit that. The other thing is you may have seen in our atrium, we've posted our opening session storyboards. I neglected to mention this yesterday, but we had really talented sketch note artist recording sort of, again, those takeaways and learnings, encapsulating all of the great information we had in our opening sessions yesterday. And so if you haven't had a chance, please take a look outside. That was done by Kingman Inc., who is a local sketch noting company. What I think is really great about it is that it really brings these complex ideas down into simple, easily digestible, visually compelling form right there on the board. So please do feel free to take a look at that. If yesterday we kind of looked at the bigger picture and further built out the evidence base for the foundation of why we are doing what we do, today we're diving deeper into the how and the what. How do we actually go about achieving change, and how do we actually go about doing that course correction that we were talking about? So today's programming is going to dive deeper into those kinds of strategies, taking best practices from the Mediterranean diet, looking at how we can sort of flip things to carbohydrates on our menus that are healthier, more sustainable, and also delicious, never forgetting the deliciousness, and also learning lessons in change management from those who have sort of walked the course and learned things along the way. We're also going to have the opportunity for more intimate conversations and exchange during today's breakouts, as well as a few of our general sessions. We are going to have the opportunity to bring in some audience questions into those. So in order to do that, we are using an app called Slido. You'll see here, and I am now just realizing I was going to have you pull out your phones and we were going to do a quick poll, but I realized that we're not actually set up to do that quite yet. So unfortunately, we're going to skip that part. But Slido is super easy to use. If you're in the app, you'll see that we have a live Q&A button, and you just click on that button. And if you don't have the app, although you really should, if you haven't gotten that message from me yet, you can just go to slido.com on any mobile device, enter the event code, which is MOC 2019, and you're in already. So it's very simple. Feel free to go in there now, put it on your phone, put in the event code so that you're ready to go, so that you're ready to interact. And with that, we're ready for diving into our next session on the Mediterranean diet. So I'm going to welcome back Greg Drescher to the stage. Please help me welcome him.
Thanks, Jackie. Good morning, everyone. Certainly near the top of my list in terms of how to make some of these things happen are the various possibilities around the Mediterranean diet. We're going to jump in with a very short session that in part will preview more programming that we have this afternoon, but I don't know of any better example. There are other examples. I don't know of any better example than how to serve up a planetary health diet or the menus of change principles than the absolutely delicious traditional Mediterranean diet. So this is a quote from a lot of the Foundational Science was published in the American Journal of Clinical Nutrition from 1995. Just to read, quote from that, the Mediterranean diet pyramid is based on food patterns typical of Crete, much of the rest of Greece, and southern Italy in the early 1960s. This is just where a lot of the data was, where adult life expectancy was among the highest in the world, and rates of chronic heart disease, certain cancers, and other diet-related chronic diseases were among the lowest. The diet was characterized by abundant plant foods. Just in case you forgot what the Mediterranean looks like. And here we're talking about really, not only the southern European Mediterranean, but North Africa and the Eastern Mediterranean. Folks like Yoda Madelenge has sort of, and all kinds of other authors and chefs have really brought up, I think, the Eastern Mediterranean and into the Middle East a little bit, the possibilities there of late, but there's just such variety around the Mediterranean. And I think one of the things that, sometimes I remind chefs and operators of is, sometimes we're jumping into all of this, and it's like, where do I start, what do I do? It's like, well, it's like sometimes you bring in a consultant to solve a problem in your business, right? These are cultures that have been working at plant-based, plant-forward traditions for literally centuries, and they've learned something, and we should be spending more time seeing what they've come up with. But I think one of the things that has really emerged over the last few years in the thinking of a lot of us is that this is not simply a cultural model for healthy eating, it's also a model for planetary health. And as we'll hear from a little bit from our colleague, researcher from the University of Navarra in Spain, that means lower greenhouse gas emissions, fewer water impacts, better land use patterns, and a better outcome for biodiversity. Unfortunately, at the same time that the Mediterranean diet is becoming more popular in this country, I think U.S. News and World Report does an annual survey with various health experts on top popular diets, and the Mediterranean diet was #1 this year. So there's no lack of recognition of the Mediterranean diet in the United States, and yet within the Mediterranean, it's in decline. This is a couple of quotes from the Washington Post last year. Mediterranean children have stopped eating the Mediterranean diet, and they now have the highest obesity rates in Europe. The Mediterranean diet for these children in these countries is gone. We need to recover it. This from WHO speaking at an obesity conference last year. And, unfortunately, it's this perfect storm of hyper-processed food coming in. Bigger household budgets, so there's more meat being purchased, and also disruption of household patterns where you typically had someone at home cooking. A lot of this food was based in the home, right? And so now you have both people working in a marriage, and there's less time to do a lot of those low and slow legume and vegetable-based dishes. But part of it is also a mindset. Sometimes you don't appreciate what you have, and I found that when I've been in the Mediterranean, is people go, it's like, you people in the U.S. are chasing after our Mediterranean diet, and we're running after some other shiny object. And so some of it is just about perception and awareness and aspiration. To tackle some of these challenges, we mentioned a little bit yesterday, Anne McBride mentioned this, we've launched a new partnership with the University of Barcelona called the Torribera Mediterranean Center, which is essentially an academic studies center for research and education focused on the Mediterranean diet, mainly to translate a lot of what is now settled science into how do we make this, how do we bring this into the restaurants in the Mediterranean, into the popular culture of the Mediterranean, and around the world to make it more accessible. This is a shot of the campus, the main campus, and our vision is really to accelerate the adoption and, importantly, the renewal of the healthy, sustainable Mediterranean dietary patterns through the creation of innovation-centric ecosystem of academic educators, researchers, students, chefs, public health experts, food business leaders, and entrepreneurs. We actually have 3 councils. We have a scientific council, we have a business leadership council, and we have a culinary and food studies council that all come together for this shot of the campus there. We're launching 2 master's degrees program this fall. How cool to go to Barcelona and get a master's degree focused on Mediterranean food culture and health and sustainability. We're launching our first conference there in October, Tomorrow Tastes Mediterranean, and our first Mediterranean concentration for our bachelor students that will start up in January of next year. For more information, you can go to tmcmediterranean.org. Ann McBride, who's the deputy director, is also here. You can ask questions of her as well. And then just one final note in terms of where to look for this. If you get off a plane in Barcelona or Madrid or Istanbul or Rome, or pick your city, Marrakesh or Tunis or wherever, you can easily run into the animal-forward Mediterranean diet, because it's the same dynamic that's happening all over the world. Restaurants often, grab those celebratory dishes, and that's what you get. And so you have to dig a bit. You have to look in the home cooking traditions, hopefully get into the homes, get off the tourist route. There's a fabulous library that's been published on these home cooking traditions. Look deeply into the Mediterranean produce and legume kitchen. And I'll just end with this quote from my good friend and a friend of Dr. Willett, Professor Antonia Trikopoulou at the University of Athens, who said she was sort of frustrated years ago. She was getting all these interviews about why is the Mediterranean diet so successful, and why do you people eat all this produce, and what's going on over there? How does this work? And she said, we Greeks don't like vegetables any more than you Americans do. She said, it's how we prepare them. It's not that we just like vegetables. It's how we prepare them with olive oil and all of the aromatics and spices and fabulous cooking techniques and recipes from the Mediterranean. So this afternoon at 3:30, there's a session on the sustainable kitchen strategies for the Mediterranean with Dr. Martinez, who I'll mention in just a minute, Chef Seamus Mullen from New York. You won't want to miss that. And with that, it's my pleasure to welcome back to the CIA our good friend, Dr. Miguel Angel Martinez Gonzalez, who is professor and chair of the Department of Preventive Medicine and Public Health at the University of Navarra Medical School in Spain. He is on our scientific council for the Torribera Center. He is also the principal investigator of an advanced research grant from the European Research Council funding PREDIMED Plus trial, which is a large clinical trial assessing the effects of a Mediterranean diet on the primary prevention of cardiovascular disease. He's also the principal investigator of the SUN cohort study, which I believe he's going to talk about, and he's really one of the best-known experts worldwide on the Mediterranean diet and has comprehensively studied the nutritional determinants of obesity in the Spanish population. So he's going to share just a snapshot of 3 or 4 slides to give you a little taste of the evidence base behind capturing the state of the art of the Mediterranean diet. Please welcome Dr. Martinez.
Thank you very much, Greg. It is a great pleasure and an honor for me to be here again. I'm going just to give some few glimpses of what is the scientific evidence behind the Mediterranean diet and what are the main scientific knowledge that we have acquired during the last 2-3 decades. This is a very important study conducted by Antonia Trikopoulou in Athens. And in this study, she defined the Mediterranean diet with this 9-item score. So basically, you can see here that it is a plant-based diet with positive points for a high consumption of monounsaturated to saturated fat ratio. This is 1 point for everybody who was in the 50 top % of the consumption of monounsaturated to saturated fat. So monounsaturated here in Mediterranean countries represented a high intake of olive oil. A high intake of olive oil is completely joined to the high consumption of vegetable, as Greg has just said, and also 1 point for high consumption of fruits and nuts, vegetables, cereals, legumes, and fish. So, and the reverse is done for animal-based products as meat and meat products and dairy. So those who were in the lower 50% received 1 point, and then 1 additional point for moderate alcohol consumption. So everybody can have from 0 to 9 points. Well, this was done in, let me see. Okay, this was done in 22,000 Greek adults at baseline, and they follow up then for 44 months, and they found a 25% reduction in the risk of any cause mortality, 33% reduction in death from coronary heart disease, and 24% reduction in death from cancer. So this is a single study. It was published a long time ago. Very recently, we have seen how this has been replicated. What is the accrual of scientific evidence to support this important protection against the main causes of death? And we published very recently in Circulation Research all these studies. Each line here, I acknowledge that the font is very small, but you can have just a view, an overall view of how many studies have been done with this same or similar scoring system. You see that for each 2 points in this 0 to 9 score, there is a reduction in the risk of main cardiovascular events, clinical events. So this means thousands and thousands of persons all over the world follow for 10, 20 years, or even more than 20 years, to see how this adherence to the Mediterranean diet is related to lower risk of the main cause of death, which is cardiovascular disease. So this is huge. There is no other dietary pattern with such an accrual of evidence. But this is observational. All these are cohort studies where the investigators collect the data on adherence to the Mediterranean diet at baseline, and then they follow up the participants to see how many cases of cardiovascular disease are. So we conducted in Spain the PREDIMED trial. It has been recently republished. I will deal with this in more detail this afternoon. But very recently, 1 year ago, it was republished in the New England Journal of Medicine, a republication, and we saw that there was a 30% reduction in the risk of major cardiovascular disease, but now with an experimental design. So instead of only collecting data on what was the initial consumption, we recommended some participants to better adhere to the Mediterranean diet and to other participants at random to follow a low-fat diet. And we saw that the green line and the maroon line, they represent 2 Mediterranean diets. One of them supplemented with nuts and the other with extra virgin olive oil. And you see how this was the reduction in major cardiovascular events. So this is a very good piece of evidence to support with a randomized clinical trial the evidence of the Mediterranean diet. It is not done in an empty space. It is previously accompanied by a big picture of many other observational studies and another large trial conducted in France, the Lyon trial. And also in the SAN cohort, SAN means Seguimiento Universidad de Navarra, we saw this effect of the Mediterranean diet. I will deal with this this afternoon in environmental footprints regarding greenhouse gas emissions according to this 0 to 9 score. So this is the reduction that we observe as people better adhere to the Mediterranean diet, but also in other aspects of environmental footprints, as it is the use of land, the use of water, and the use of energy. So this is an exciting field of research. We are finding really very good results. And now we are conducting a very large trial, the PREDIMED Plus trial, with almost 7,000 participants, where we also do physical activity and weight loss. This is exciting, and we are very much looking forward to the collaboration in the Torribera Center, because there is much need for translation to the general public and to incorporate all these in the culture and the society. I will deal further with all these issues this afternoon. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you, Dr. Martinez, for that quick snapshot of the evidence, which really is at this point settled science. Obviously, we're going to continue to do more research. The scientists are going to continue to do more research, but now we've got a high level of confidence that we can leverage that for translational implementation work. Now, over the last several years, we have focused heavily on the protein shift, which is near the top of the to-do list around planetary health diet, around the menus of change principles. But there are other parts of the diet that are important as well, and carbohydrates are also incredibly important and a priority for our industry. So this next session we've called From Whole Grains to Fries and Sweets, Carbohydrates and the Business of Healthy Sustainable Menus. And it's really my pleasure to introduce our moderator, Chavanne Hanson, who's going to lead this session. Chavanne joined Google just recently in December 2018 as the Food Choice Architecture and Nutrition Manager on the Global Food Team. With cafes, teaching kitchens, and events that serve several thousand meals each day, the Google Food Team works with a variety of partners and suppliers to deliver delicious, nutritious food and innovative experiences to fuel Google's culture and future. One of the things that I'm so impressed with about Google, if you go there and you have lunch at any of their facilities, you go, job done. They're serving really amazing plant-forward food, and yet they're not sitting on their hands. There's a restlessness in the food team that they have to keep moving forward and do better, and I really admire that. Chavanne creatively leverages nutrition sciences, programming, food choice architecture, behavioral sciences, and development of well-being approaches to create meaningful user experience for Googlers. She is actively involved in Google's food external partnerships, including the Google Food Lab, the World Business Council for Sustainable Development's FRESH program, and of course, Menus of Change. I mentioned yesterday that she's the vice chair of our Business Leadership Council. Before joining Google, Chavanne was the Assistant Vice President and Senior Public Affairs Manager of Nutrition, Health, and Wellness at Nestle headquarters in Switzerland. Please welcome Chavanne Hanson.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Greg. I appreciate that introduction, and it's a pleasure to be here with all of you. Just to be in part of a community that is so passionate about food and nutrition and helping people be healthy and well. So I'm excited to open up the panel today. I want to give you just a few remarks about the topic and then introduce you to four really wonderful panelists, and we'll have a good discussion today about carbohydrates. When I first started practicing dietetics many years ago now, early in my career, carbohydrates were king and made up the vast majority of an individual's diet. Since then, we've seen so many dietary fads. We've seen low carb, we've seen high protein, we've seen low fat, intermittent fasting, low calorie. We've seen it all, and we've also seen the fact that carbohydrates have largely been lumped into one distinct group. Our menus are dominated by refined carbohydrates. We see them in the marketplace in a significant way. And good carbs, those that are actually nutritious and are the building blocks of a healthy and balanced diet, have been overlooked. They've been categorized as bad carbs. And what we want to do today is to focus on the vast number of carbs, how they can be, again, part of a balanced and healthy diet. It's trendy now to go low carb and even no carb, but ditching carbs is tough to do, and it eliminates a whole lot of great food groups and important nutrition that we all need to consider. If you cut out all carbs, you have to give up fruits, vegetables, whole grains, beans and legumes, all of the things that we've been talking about, we heard about yesterday, and we'll continue to hear about in the rest of our conference. These foods, again, are truly the building blocks of a healthy diet. A study published in The Lancet recently finds that people who eat a diet rich in fiber and whole grains have a reduced risk of type 2 diabetes, stroke, coronary artery disease, and colorectal cancer. The study authors say their findings provide convincing evidence for nutrition guidelines to focus on increasing dietary fiber and on replacing refined grains with whole grains. U.S. dietary guidelines recommend that at least half of your daily grain consumption should come from whole grains. Currently, most Americans underconsume whole grains and exceed the recommended limits on refined grains. So today we're going to explore how to make an intentional shift from simple and refined to whole and complete. Some have called them intact or slow carbohydrates. We'll explore how we can better engage customers in healthier carbohydrate choices and seek to understand healthy and delicious carbohydrates from various perspectives. And as I mentioned, we've got 4 fantastic speakers that come from different areas of expertise. And we're going to bring these perspectives to bear now. Each speaker will have about 15 minutes to present, again, their perspective and where they're coming from, followed by a 30-minute panel discussion. And again, we'll take some questions for the audience. So as you're hearing the presentations, if you want to start to cultivate and curate some questions that you have, that will be super. So our first speaker, Bob Klein, is the founder and CEO of Community Grains, an integrated information-driven whole grain products company, which focuses on nutrient-rich soils, advanced milling, transparency, and scientific analysis. With his wife, Maggie, he is also the co-owner of Oliveto in Oakland, California, a farm-to-table restaurant which uses Italian-based culinary principles. Previous professional experiences include 30-plus years of communications and marketing positions as television producer, consultant, and executive. Help me welcome Bob Klein.
That was a good introduction. Thank you. So Community Grains was born out of the restaurant, and the DNA of the restaurant really was almost journalistic. It was sort of curiosity, getting into things, and we've been there a long time, and as food trends would come and go, what we would find is that the most interesting and the most worthwhile and lasting things were the things that were deeper, that rather than going out and searching for things, we would sort of get a deeper understanding of what we were doing, and and it yielded better food. And we had a significant community to do that in. We have great farmers and great farmland. We're very near a university, UC Berkeley. That's the right slide. We have great chefs. We have a community that supports this kind of curiosity. And in the university are biochemists and plant biologists that that supported what we were doing and added to what we were doing. So coming to understand wheat, I think I need to figure this out. That's not it. There it is. So coming to understand wheat is complicated. We were used to going out to farms and finding a tomato and learning about tomato and advancing tomatoes. Wheat is part of a very large system. And it's part of an industrial system that really was born over the last 160 years. And it has, as part of the industrial system, this sort of walled off information. So the most basic questions that were pertinent to us what was the wheat, when, how, when was it grown, how was it milled. All of that wasn't available to us. Information that was available was often inaccurate, and I was watching Mad Men. During the Mad Men, I used to think frequently that some of the answers we'd be getting would be coming out of Madison Avenue. So what we did was to sort of get deeper into it, and we discovered that in order to understand wheat and understand an entire process, a piece of it individually, we had to create an alternative system. And that's basically what was the beginning of Community Grains. So it took us some time to understand just how important it was and how essential wheat is to the success of our species. I'd imagine that most people have lost understanding of wheat's importance. Half the calories of Europe for 1,000 years was wheat. Europe thrived on it. It spread throughout the world. The world thrived on it. It's easy to understand the dominance in our history as well. The wheat is highly adaptive to different climates. It doesn't require lots of water. There are thousands of diverse varieties. It's easy to grow, it stores well, and it has a remarkable range of essential components. It has fibers and minerals, vitamins, and has many, many micronutrients. There are very few foods that carry that range of nutrients. And, referring to the first presentation on the Mediterranean diet, wheat is part of a whole system. It's part of a synergy of a whole food. It's part of the Mediterranean diet, and it's a component of the synergy of all those foods. When you look at the technological advances of humans have made to make food bioavailable, cultivation, fire, breeding, milling, fermentation, wheat has been central to all of these things. Wheat's far more than any other food fundamental to the success of our species, but we haven't treated it very well. Now we'll see if I get this right. So Michael Pollan says that in the 1850s, with the introduction of the roller mill, that's when we went off track. The technology of the roller mill was in advance and brought great benefits, but there were unintended consequences. I think we're all clear on the nutritional losses, though I don't think we may not understand the full extent of those losses. But the roller mill turned out to be the Pied Piper of industrial food. I don't think it was the intention in Schultzberger that their roller mill would roll over thousands of years of culture. But ultimately, we've lost connection with even our own farmers, bakers, and previous generations in favor of white bread. Blandness isn't in vogue anymore. Somebody's helping me, I think. Common wisdom has it that wheat has some nutrients, but they also exist in many other foods, so the loss in milling is immaterial. The reality is that even if that were true, most people don't eat those foods. This graph represents 8 important nutrients removed from wheat when it's refined. The other graph represents the percentage of Americans deficient in those nutrients. Wheat is 20 to 30% of our caloric intake. There's a huge opportunity to improve public health with even modest increases of whole grain consumption. I've seen a presentation by Dr. David Kaley, who is a biochemist from the Nutrition and Metabolic Center at Children's Hospital Research in Oakland. It's called CORI. And he has a much fuller array of micronutrient presentation. It's directly associated, micronutrients that are directly associated with human development and health. These 8 nutrients are just the beginning of the story. I think we should change. I'm not sure. We can move to the next slide. This was B material I was going to cut for time. So I think, let me see how I do this. I better, okay. I think Bill Stouffer from Arden Mills will have a much better read on the real idea of the trends of whole grain consumption. When I look at the published data, it's very murky to me. It's not clear. It seems to be in the range of 8%. It seems to be growing modestly over the last decade. I get confused as to when they're talking about whole grain, if they're talking about wheat or oats, or whether it's processed or not, what exactly it is. What I do believe, though, is that there is enormous interest in whole grain foods. There's lots of evidence in the culture, but there's also great confusion about it, and there's great mistrust that's growing. The International Food Information Council in 2019 survey had some useful observations. I think there's a nexus of interest in environmental sustainability and healthiness, transparency, and animal welfare that apply to most groups. From the report, consumers struggle to know how to recognize sustainable sources. 1 in 4 consumers actively seek health benefits from food. Food confidence has seen a decrease of 5% just in the last year. Fiber and whole grains are almost universally perceived as healthier foods. And millennials and Gen Z people, that's where the mistrust is really growing. It's going in the wrong direction. So the community range, we have a lot of interest. We're spread way too thin, but for this group, I think there are really 3 critical issues that will help us move the ball forward. For consumers to trust what we're doing and to move them towards eating healthier food, trust is the cornerstone of what we need to do. Again, Dr. Kaley at Corey has developed a test for whole grain content in food products. Using a biomarker, wheat germ agglutinin, he's developed a precise measurement of how much grain there is actually in a food sample labeled whole grain. This may be the first such test. He tested 4 national brand whole grain wheat flours and 7 national brand whole grain pastas. The results were disappointing, and for the most of the pastas, they were shocking. These pastas measured in the range of just 10% of the expected whole grain. That means that someone hoping to get their recommended 3 portions of whole grain a day would need 30 portions of pasta. It also means that consumers have no way of knowing, and there's no label assuring them in that grocery store that the whole grain content in the food they're looking for is actually there. Their only option is to buy intact grain. There's no legal definition for whole grain. So the distrust our consumers have for us is very well deserved. It's essential to establish an accurate biochemical analysis of wheat food labeled whole grain and whole wheat at the point of completed processing. This is so consumers can make better informed dietary decisions, so research scientists can work from a universally accepted baseline, that there's a definition of whole grain for studies on studies of health effects on whole grain consumption, and so manufacturers can offer whole grain foods with confidence, so regulators could be motivated to develop accurate, enforceable labeling. We've talked to the press about this study, and they want to know about malfeasance. They want to know who's the bad guy. And it's more complicated than that, I think. The media has more than its fair share of responsibility for this broken system. Doctors will make irresponsible health claims with little evidence, without any vetting by the media. The theory makes a splash, the media's happy, the doctors get rich, confusion, unhealthy food trends follow. Later, the claims are disproven, the confusion and mistrust build. Transparency is vital for trust. At Community Grains, we've developed 23 points of identity as our standard. We reveal every piece of the supply chain from the seed and their source to farmer, land quality, soil development, crop rotation, water use, milling and storage, dates of harvest and milling, everything. We have standards for these policies, but the overriding principle is transparency. It's more than most consumers would want, but the information is there for those who do want it, and for journalists and influencers, it's there and we stand behind it. Certification at times are unreliable, but we trust people who will be open with us. And the word whole actually means something. It doesn't mean fiber. It doesn't mean 10% of whole. It means the kernel in its entirety. It's the synergy of all those nutrients that have served us so well for centuries. So scale. At Community Grains, as we scale up, our expansion plans will take us to current organic farmers, good farmers who are looking at wheat as a viable cover crop and part of a rotation plan, as opposed to farmers who just grow wheat or grain. It requires some infrastructure, but we're working on that. Some of the most exciting innovations in what we're doing are coming from the farms in their development of soil. We're hearing really interesting crop rotation plans. In California, there are 5 million acres of organic farmland, and far more than that can be converted. We have lots of good farmers. Regenerative farming is for the benefit of the land. It's for the benefit of our food and carbon sequestration. It's a big home run. When we look at industrial farming, from where I stand, which I have minimal understanding of industrial system, I'm a true non-expert in industrial wheat production, but I have some observations and questions I'd raise with humility. These are very big industries developed over 150 years. They're big ships, very difficult to turn, but with expanding interest in soil quality, nutrient value, and the potential for developing a market for better food, if zero-based questions aren't being raised but at the highest levels, it would seem like a good time to do it. So again, with humility, here are a couple of things that I thought about. When we began 10 years ago, I understood that good flour was, in part, consistent flour. The same from bag to bag. Variation wasn't acceptable. We assumed we'd have to blend as well to meet that standard, but now we're finding bakers and even production bakers who are excited by variation and by the bread they can make with it. So we wonder, what's the cost of consistency and its relative benefits? We're living in a smart world that's transformed very big businesses to great benefit. For the farm and ecosystem and what we eat, variation has substantial benefits. The second question, I'd hear from organic farmers, they'd complain about the expensive chicken manure needed to bring the wheat in with enough protein, 13 to 15% protein to make bread. Now we're bringing in wheat on nutrient soil, milled, and have bakers preferring wheat with lower levels of protein. That can be below 10%. They find better flavor and aroma. We've worked with the California Wheat Commission. They concur protein level doesn't measure the quality of the protein. So protein measured in a standard wheat analysis, which was designed for an industrial process, isn't helpful in predicting the quality of a whole grain fermented bread. Winemakers make a low nitrogen soil because the nitrogen that promotes plant growth diminishes flavor. Presumably you need high protein in the wheat, or added gluten to stand up to high-speed mixtures in the industrial bread process. But you could ask, what's the cost of fertilizer application plus the diminishment, soil quality, and likely nutrition loss compared to slowing the mixtures down. I'm sure it's more complicated than this. There's likely a quality versus quantity equation here, but certainly the level, the quality of our food needs to be taken a higher priority. We have to ask ourselves, are we selling a bag of calories or are we selling a bag of nutrition? There's a history of noted chefs in creating food that over time finds its way to the grocery aisles. For some foods, it's been a proven strategy of adoption for a larger audience. We're working with some great chefs who are taking us in that direction. I haven't found the button yet. There it is. So this is a hard white wheat whole grain gemelli pasta. Jelena in Los Angeles, he has Justo Travis led is a very talented guy, very well known in Los Angeles, who makes great food and has a substantial following. Nancy Silverton is prototyping a whole grain pizza. This is hard white wheat. It's milled super fine. It's milled rather specially, and this is delicious. And it has the bite that you expect from white flour plus substantially more flavor. And then this is our bread. We're really proud. The bread's really delicious. We're really proud of it. But the information on the bag, it's still a bit clumsy, but in ways we think it's the right direction for labeling. It has full information. On the gusset, you'll see the beginning of 23 points of identity. This is the entire supply chain, and so people can refer to it. As the farmer and the miller and the baker advance their methods, creating real value for consumers, it's critical that we find a way to express that for the consumer. And we are able to bring that to the package, so we find a language that will be useful, not numbing, but relevant. We're proud of this bed. The quality of the wheat is coming from good soil. It's milled in a unique way. We can par-bake it, 75% freeze it, ship it frozen to be baked off in the store. It compares very well with any fresh artisan bread. And we think it's a breakthrough for frozen bread. Thanks for the attention. My voice lasted.
Okay, great. Moving on to our second speaker, we have Liz Grossman, who's been a Chicago-based writer and editor for 15 years. She's the managing editor of Plate Magazine, a national award-winning trade publication for the professional chef industry. Liz is a co-founder of a food-themed live literary series and nonprofit organization, Between Bites. Throughout her career, her freelance writing has appeared in Newsweek, Rob Report, CNN Traveler, Veranda, and others. I'm sure you've seen her work. Please help me welcome Liz Grossman.
Thank you, Chavanne. I'm very excited to be here. This is my first time at Menus of Change, so really fitting for some of the work we've been doing at Plate. As Chavanne explained, I am the managing editor of Plate. We are a magazine for the professional chef industry, so our readers are independent food service operators, professional chefs, menu developers, anyone who sort of has to put a menu together. So we produce 6 magazines a year. We do a ton of newsletters. We have a huge recipe database. And we are always sort of thinking of our theme. So every issue revolves around one culinary theme, whether it's an ingredient, a day part, a region. We're always thinking about this idea of healthy, sustainable menus, but obviously for chefs, who are cooking in the restaurants, they need to be delicious as well, easily menued, something that customers are coming back for. So with the idea of alternative flours and grains, we've done a gluten-free issue, we've done bread issues, we did a grains issue a few years ago, but we'd never really done an issue that was devoted to alternative flours. So obviously we always have breads, we have pizzas, pastas, things like that in our every issue that we do. But this was an image that I saw on Instagram. It was actually a post. I think it was a Les Dames d'Escoffier post. And I was just really blown away by the variety of grains and flours that are out there. Some I've obviously heard of, some I hadn't. There were more. Couldn't fit the whole thing in that one slide. But white Sonora, turkey red, bloody butcher, heirloom grains, at different sorts of grains and things that I was like, this could actually be an entire issue just devoted to whole grains. We actually stayed away from AP and whole grains as the main focus of our recipes in the issue, but we did find that chefs are still, cutting some of the recipes with AP. So as long as it was a blend, we felt that it really made sense to do an entire issue just devoted to alternative flours. So it was out March, April this year, the second issue of the year that we did. Oops. Just wanted to go back to the slide before. Okay, so the question was, why do an alternative flour issue? So the need for flour made with something other than wheat was growing, we found, both for consumers who are gluten intolerant, chefs who want more complexity and flavor in their breads, crackers, pasta, pizza, cookies, pies, and cakes. So for us to do an entire issue, we really need to make sure that every day part is covered. We can have breakfast items, we can have desserts. So this really seemed like a great opportunity to cover really the whole menu. We started to look at, obviously, the benefits of alternative flours, and we've been hearing a lot about whole grains and the benefits of them in general. There's been a demand chefs are finding for items made with healthy flours. In the issue, we got into almond, barley, buckwheat, chestnut, mesquite, rye, spelt, and so many more we didn't even have room for as we kind of dug into the topic. Obviously, we've been hearing a lot about gluten-free, necessity, diet trends, Whole30, paleo, people just avoiding, certain carbohydrates, wanting low carb, just wanting healthier options. And when we started talking to chefs, we really found that they loved the flavor, the color, the texture that using alternative flours and grains lent to bread baskets, their pastas, dessert items. And then as we dug into the recipes, finding that a lot of them did still need AP to make, the kind of pizza crust they wanted, just not as much, just a lower gluten item. And then obviously we've touched upon this a little bit, the agricultural and environmental effects that when chefs are using more of these whole grains on their menus, there's more of a demand, and that will ultimately help the farm systems. So we did a lot of coverage of rye flour. Rye flour comes in light, medium, and dark varieties. It's malty, nutty, slightly milky in flavor, and we found it's really conducive to cookies, breads, baked goods. It does contain less gluten than wheat or barley, but it is not gluten-free. So, we really were trying to keep track of which of these are gluten-free, which are not gluten-free. They aren't all gluten-free just because they are an alternative flour, but a lot of them had less gluten. So for our issue, and we recreate the dishes in our photo studio. This was actually one we could not recreate because it was this very intense, crazy bread that this chef from Milwaukee at Birch & Butcher does, Miles Borgraff. It's a seeded rye bread, and this rye bread, he actually sent it to us so that we could cut it up and kind of style it and shoot it. It's made with bread flour, rye flour, spelt flour, malted rye flour, wheat berry flour. He's got a ton of berries in here, rye, wheat, spelt, black lentils, brown flax seeds, pepitas. So this chef was really passionate about experimenting, playing around with whole grains, realizing this is a very dense bread. A lot of these chefs are trying to still make this edible and make it appealing, and it was hardy enough to hold up to this rainbow trout application. So he would let this kind of air out for a few days to get it kind of lighter, but this was very delicious. Porcini-rye Cavatelli from Blue Duck Tavern in Washington, D.C. Also very delicious. This had fennel sausage, broccoli rabe. The pasta itself, the chef used toasted buckwheat flour, toasted dark rye flour, toasted caraway seeds, and cocoa powder. So color is also really important. This is on like a Parmesan broth. So I think chefs love the color that they're getting from using these alternative flours and then even toasting some of them to get even more of that nuttiness. He also vacuum sealed his dough to assist with the hydration because not having the AP flour does tend to, they'd say that it would dry out sometimes. So they'd have to really figure out how to make a gluten-free pasta work. Oops. So rye chocolate chip cookies, this is from Josephine House in Austin. This was a mix of rye and AP. This was inspired because the chef was doing dark rye breads with caraway and chocolate. So the pastry chef wanted to do a chocolate chip cookie with rye flour. It isn't gluten-free, it has AP in it, but it would be, she loved the nuttiness that adding rye flour just brought to the cookie. So then we talked about mesquite flour, which is very cool. It's made from the bean pods of the mesquite tree. Sweet and earthy with notes of cinnamon, vanilla, toasted nuts, and graham crackers. We were seeing in baked goods, cakes, crackers, and pairs with, a number of different flavors, which makes it really conducive to sweet applications. Mesquite flour is gluten-free and very high in protein. So just talking about getting more of this healthy benefit from these flours. So this was a mesquite flour cracker from Cured in San Antonio. The cracker did have mesquite and AP flour. This is sort of his take on a brewer's cracker. He's based in Texas, so he wanted to have that local, getting it milled locally and things like that. A lot of chefs really liked the local tie-in to sourcing flours from mills, near their restaurants. This is a mesquite blue corn muffin from the Turquoise Room. Again, the influence of Arizona and sort of sourcing close to where they are. These did have cornmeal and mesquite flour, and there was some regular flour in here as well. I think some chefs just wanted to, still get that fluffiness of a muffin, even if it meant it's just half AP, but then something else kind of nutty and sort of bringing that healthful property to it. So Benne flour, got a little bit into this. It's made from compressed Benne seeds. It's got a coarse texture and natural sweetness. We saw it being added to rice, stews, soups, pastries, cookies, breads, and biscuits. Benne flour is gluten-free. And this is a Benne flour Benedict from Benne on Eagle in Asheville, North Carolina. Not gluten-free. They were playing around with trying to get some gluten-free items when they came up with this, so I guess they just kind of decided to keep some AP flour in there. But sugar, honey, baking powder, I'm sorry, this one is Benne cake flour, and then the pastry chef needed to get more moisture. She just didn't think there was enough moisture from just the Benne flour, but they did put Benne seeds on top of it. So we did see a lot of these dishes being garnished with seeds and grains, just as sort of that added kind of extra layer of texture and color. Sea Island Benne cake with butter roux icing from Big Jones in Chicago, which is a great sort of New Orleans restaurant. It's sort of traditional. This does have AP flour, but it has the Benne cake flour too. So I think Paul really liked the sweetness that comes from using Benne flour in a cake. Chickpea flour. Very cool, very diverse. It's made from finely milled chickpeas, a long tradition in Indian cooking, so it's known as besan in Indian cooking, also common in Italian cooking. We find it's a great binder for baking because of its sticky texture, an ideal thickener for sauces and soups. It is gluten-free and very high in protein at 23%. This is a soca, which is a chickpea pancake with spinach salad and goat cheese from Granor Farms in Three Oaks, Michigan. Sometimes the chefs would talk about these soca pancakes being very dense and heavy, and they kind of set out to figure out how to get a chickpea flour pancake to be lighter. So some of them were adding soda water, baking soda. We saw some playing around with yeast. This is a yeasted chickpea pancake from Lula Café in Chicago, which is one of my favorites. Jason Hamill wanted to do, he has a gluten-free flour in here, active dry yeast and chickpea flour, and creating air by adding yeast to this. This is Dokla, looking at an Indian application from Superkana International, brand new restaurant just about to open. This is kind of a chickpea floured cake, and it's colored with turmeric. And then a vegetable bajija, and this kind of shows how chickpea flour is also used for frying applications. And of course, panisse fries in anchovy oil, so you're seeing chickpea French fries and sort of this application being paired with interesting aiolis and sauces, something that's just going to enhance that chickpea flavor. And of course, gluten-free pizza. So, you know, I think that people who are gluten intolerant, gluten-free, feel like they've been sort of deprived of like pizza that, you know, has that chew, has that density. And chefs are still really trying to crack the code on how to create a gluten-free pizza or a lower gluten pizza. So we saw them blending flours and trying to achieve that crust. So we saw white rice flour, brown rice flour, and tapioca flour. We saw other combos like tapioca and coconut, chickpea, corn, and potato. A lot of experimentation, a lot of just trying things out. Usually the chefs would need egg or xanthan gum as a binder. Because low gluten or gluten-free dough isn't going to be elastic. It's not going to trap that air and get that oxidation and the carbon dioxide going. So, you know, you can't really proof it or knead it. You have to figure out another way to get that texture. This is from the Luggage Room in Pasadena, California. It's called 310 to Pasadena. He did create this chickpea corn potato flour. You can see it's kind of thin. You know, it's like, I don't know how, it's sort of like trying to get that thicker crust without AP. I think they're just continuing to try. This one was a combo, and of course he adds the avocados and the eggs, which just makes everything better, no matter what's under it. This is another pizza from Cultivare. He used tapioca and coconut flour, and then of course adding the mushrooms and the cheese just to sort of complement that earthiness. And you know, he did get kind of a nice rise here on the dough. So we talked a little bit, we didn't really get into this that much, but the alts. So we focused a little bit on coffee flour, which is very cool. It's high in fiber and protein and gluten-free. It's made from the dried fruit and pulp of the coffee cherry, and it actually has terroir based on the origin of the beans. And a little bit on insect flour. I mean, it's obviously, you know, very big right now. It's very high in protein, 10 grams per serving, comparable to chicken breast. It is gluten-free and has a nutty flavor. Looking at coffee flour, this is from Miller's Guild in Seattle. So Jason Wilson is a big proponent of coffee flour. He actually has a product that he's created. He makes hamburger buns with it. He makes pizza crusts. He makes crackers. This was a granola that he serves with yogurt. And he just loves coffee flour. So I had this. It was delicious. And it really kind of gives it just an interesting, you know, when it's sort of paired with the granola, that oaty sort of flavor combined with the coffee flavor is really interesting. And cricket flour, we mostly saw in protein bars, like this one from XO. We did see some chefs like TJ Steele at Claro in New York. It's a Oaxacan restaurant, and he's putting some crickets in, not flour, I guess that's more the insect, but he's doing sort of sauces and moles and things. But, you know, just kind of, I'm not sure if it's really ready yet for American menus, or maybe they're kind of hiding it. But, you know, I do think it's definitely, you're going to see more of that just because of the nutritional value of it. So obviously there's some agricultural and environmental benefits. Our magazine's very food focused. We're mostly recipe, sort of chef based. We don't really get into this. But in talking to some of our chefs, some of them are very passionate about working with farmers. They know what's happening with, you know, the more they sort of buy these sort of flowers, the more that the farmers are going to work to grow them. Because diversifying crops allows farmers to reap the environmental and energy advantages of longer, more complex crop rotation. It's the crops with extensive root systems, and we'll probably talk a little bit maybe more about this on the panel, like spelt, that are going to aerate the soil. Their stalks provide a healthy boost of carbon when they're plowed back in. And the idea that multi-year, multi-crop rotations produce high yields for each crop in the rotation, controlling pests and weeds with less resilience on chemical pesticides, and enhancing soil fertility. One chef that is very passionate about this is Alex Bois from Lost Bread Company in Philadelphia. He actually has a CSA grain share where customers can sign up for this every month. This was, barley was January. You get this kind of cool, fun zine with recipes and literature and messages that really just teaches customers more about one healthy grain. Alex also makes whole rye flour cookies, barley dumplings, rye pâte à choux, malted flour, hot chocolate, and spelt croissants, which when I interviewed him, he said, it's never going to be the croissant. That's sort of a French, AP flour croissant, but it's got honey flavors, it's got fresh grass flavors, it's a little bit more of a biscuit. And I think there's something cool about going to a bakery and maybe seeing, like, what's a spelt croissant? It almost like seems like it's, it's not going to be classic, but maybe they're a little healthier. Like, I don't know. I think it's cool that it's got a different texture to it and flavor. And just to kind of close with a quote from Alex. So he says, to grow grains responsibly, it takes a whole family. If you're growing them industrially and bombarding them with pesticides and fertilizers, that's one thing. But everyone knows that's not a truly sustainable method of agriculture. There has to be some happy medium between investing in soil for the future. A healthy crop rotation will switch between brassicas like mustard seed and grain crops like barley and spelt and things with a longer root system than wheat. So these are his burnt barley flour baguettes. He actually is burning the whole husks of barley flour to make these. There is some AP flour in them because he admits like he just couldn't get a baguette to work without a little bit of AP flour. But for the most part, very, very passionate chef, Grade Wade from Publican Breads in Chicago, very close to Spence Farms. So it was cool to talk to some of the chefs that have these relationships, and it is actually part of their concept of their restaurant to keep sort of whole grains in their mix. And that's it. So thank you so much for your attention, and we'll continue the conversation. Thank you.
Great job, Liz. Really interesting to bring all of that creativity to life. Beautiful pictures, lots of inspiration. Our next speaker, Bill Stouffer, is COO of Ardent Mills. In March 2013, Conagra Foods, Cargill, and CHS announced that the three companies had come together to form an independent joint venture, Ardent Mills, a new premier flour milling company. Bill formerly served as president of Conagra Mills. In his 20-plus years with Conagra Mills, Bill served as a leader within several functions, including supply chain, sales and transportation, and logistics. He holds a Bachelor of Science degree in Transportation and Logistics from Iowa State University. Let's welcome Bill Stouffer.
Thank you. All right, I'm going to wander a little bit. I can't sit behind the podium. So thank you for having Ardent Mills out here at Menus of Change. I am COO of Carbs. That's what we do, and we're very proud of it. We serve it in many different ways. It can be whole grains. It can be gluten-free. It's also organic. We're agnostic to how we put together our products for our customers. In fact, I actually have a wife that has celiac sensitivity, so she can't even eat the things that allow our family to do the things we get to do. So I get to see a wide range of things. Some of you may know about Ardent Mills, some may not, but we'll walk you through where we are, where we're going. Some may view us as big ag. Big ag today may be viewed as bad. I promise you we're not the evil empire. And we're going to walk you through that and let you know the direction. This is our Denver mill in right downtown Denver, Colorado, where our headquarters is. And I'm going to show you a picture in a moment of what's going to be happening around our Denver mill. Milling for centuries has fed and fueled the world. It is a nutritious source of sustainable food for many, many, many people. It has also provided a mechanism and a delivery method to help cure chronic disease. Think of folic acid and vitamins that get added to the products today. Wheat and wheat products and the grains that we mill are essential to what we eat and how we live our lives each and every day. Times may have changed. Essentially, what you see behind me with the picture, it's a little different in today's modern mill, but the methods are very much the same. Yes, we still roller mill it, and it is an efficient way to deliver what we do each and every day so that everybody gets to enjoy the foods that you all love. I will tell you one thing that's different from this picture today is the level of food safety we have to bring in the standards of the food that we make. We don't make an ingredient, we take an approach that we're a food company. And the levels of food safety continue to rise and increase. And so that's not exactly packaged that way today. But this is that same Denver mill, and actually this is a modern rendering of the development that's happening around our mill. in many ways, we're becoming a very local company, and it's right in the urban areas. We just announced a multi-million-dollar investment in our Denver facility just a few months ago. And what it's really going to do is package clean whole grains and an intact berry, because the market is shifting. We understand that people want all these different grains that were just presented, but they have to be clean. They have to be processed in a way that removes some of the chaff and other products that come in with the grains. And so we're going to make our first investment in our Denver facility. Another thing that we do is our footprint. These are our many dots across our system. We actually have 42 plants in our network. It's a vast network, and we know that, but it comes with tremendous responsibility, and it comes with tremendous pride in what we do each and every day. It allows for us to dream and for you to dream of the products that can be made through this network of assets and what they can do. We're committed to leading with whole grain. Arden Mills is the largest miller of whole grain products in the U.S., and we're very proud and happy of that, and we continue to expand what we do with whole grains. We work across North America for a who's who of food. It's from, as I say, Joe Bag of Donuts on the street corner all the way up to the largest branded food companies. We love every one of our customers, and we work with tremendous pride to satisfy each and every one of those customers. What was once old is new again. You just heard about all the heirloom grains coming back, and we're helping bring back these heirloom grains. They're very important to what people want to eat. As agriculture is life, we have a responsibility to make sure that our growers take care of their land. I think one of the things that, if you go out and actually visit a farm, they get really upset when you talk about what are you doing to sustain your land. A lot of these farms have been in the same families for hundreds of years. They have been sustainable for a century already. It's about adapting to the new principles of what sustainability means. They are very good stewards of their land today. Creative people and social media are influencing what we eat and the choices we all make as consumers, and we're addressing that as we go forward. And last but not least, I want to reiterate this again. The flour milling industry out here in the Northeast actually is going through another flour recall. Food safety is at the top of mind in everything we do, and it has to be. I always tell everybody and remind people, if you take raw cookie dough, sometimes flour and the products that we make with flour, it tastes just as good not cooked as it does cooked. And we have to take an approach that maybe the consumer won't cook it. And so what are we going to do to remove the chances of pathogens in our products? And Arden Mills is addressing that today. This is our footprint of what we do with organic wheat and organic flour. And we make this in not only flour form, but also in whole grains. But some people will view us as big ag. But what we have done is figure out how to operate as small ag on a very local level. With this footprint, we're driving value to the growers, increasing the supply quality of great wheat, and stability for our customers, and give you permission to experiment and play. This is a picture of a family farm that we're very proud of, Calcivic Farms in Benne, Colorado. They were the first family farm to jump on board with what we're doing with our ultra grain, whole grain flour. Ultra grain flour for us is flour that is milled to the same consistency as white flour, but does have 100% of the wheat berry in that whole grain. And it's innovations like ultra grain and our expansion of our capacity across our network that is helping us win with whole grain with all the consumers. We're also innovating with how to drive more whole grain into the diets. We have to change how people eat. We rolled out an initiative roughly 10 years ago called Super Kids, and it's an opportunity for our customers to market in a brochure that we send to all the school systems across the U.S. to drive increases in consumption of whole grain products in the school system. If we change the kids early, we know that they will continue to be whole grain consumers as you go forward. And so our efforts and our interests in how we help drive more whole grain is starting at earlier ages with the kids in schools. We're also investing in what we're doing around the functionality of whole grain. Sometimes people don't like the bitterness or the taste of it. The shelf life becomes problems, things like that. Arden Mills is working to change how we breed some of these wheats to create new functionality that increases shelf life and lowers the oxidative rancidity in whole grains. And this is all done through natural breeding. All the work we do today around breeding and creating new varieties of wheat that deliver functionality is all done without GM practices. This is another one of our farmers, Ron Rabeau. He's an organic farmer for us up in Wyoming. And the grower, the farmer, is the start of everything that we do. We're forging these closer relationships with the grower and having commercial success with the products that we ask them to grow. This means that our farmers and our growers are not commodities to Arden Mills. They are essential to making the foods that you enjoy. We have to listen to our customers as well. We have to understand your needs and your wants. We have to forge partnerships in a different way with our customers today to help you satisfy the desires you have. Bringing to life these new grains, these new food products, and new partnerships is about trust and communication between the grower, Arden Mills, and the customer. And we're proud to play that link. This is another photo of one of our growers. This is Matt Horlarscher up in Washington State. He's growing the heirloom grain white Sonora for us. Arden Mills has also learned that our job is not to dictate what people should or shouldn't eat. That's a debate that no one's going to win. Rather, it's our job to satisfy the demand and the wants of our customers and consumers. We give our customers confidence for commercializing from a small base. We also bring our expertise with food safety. This is, again, woven into everything we do. Our job is to create a palette of options for you to consume more grains in whatever form you like. Oh, by the way, if you want it in IQF, we can do that for you too. This is a picture of our growers down in Colorado's San Luis Valley. This is an important one for us. It's something we just launched, and it's our North American quinoa grown in Colorado. Talking about sustainability, we also have to have this focus and a conscious of what we're doing when we're impacting the land. This Colorado quinoa program is bringing to life qualities of quinoa that are consistent and comparable to South American quinoa. And what's really great about this program, and not only working with our great growers that we work with, for every 1,000 acres of quinoa that we grow in Colorado, we reduce water consumption by 350 million gallons annually. It's a big change in what happens to the watershed in Colorado. All right, now I got stuck. There we go. This is a picture of Kelly Whitaker. He's a Colorado Star chef, and he supports local grains and is leveraging our experience and our expertise in what we do with these grains. The Annex by Arden Mills, and I'll get to that in a second, is also taking steps to be closer with influencers for new uses and types of grains. We're supporting groups like the Noble Grain Alliance, whose focus is expanding whole grain consumption in Colorado, or the Healthy Menus Collaborative in partnership with CIA to make food service menus healthier. This work is also helping us understand that the things we do in core white and fluffy flour also translate to all these new and different grains. It means that food safety and quality and consistency matter whether we grow 1 acre of a crop or 10,000 acres of a crop. We're leveraging these core strengths Arden Mills has built through decades of operating and bringing it to life in these new and different grains and formats. And when we see the marketplace today, what's really driving all the trends of what's happening with grains? And the annex, a part of our business, and I'll explain the annex here in a second, has found these 5 drivers for innovation that we see consistently when we talk to our customers and consumers. It's own your own health. Personal definition is more than maybe the broad platform of fad diets. I've been through them all in my 29 years of milling. I've seen them all. They definitely see sticking right now as people wanting to own their own health and eat what they want to eat. The wholesome story. It's a search for meaning. It's a search for authenticity and integrity in foods. It's eating for good. And when we say eating for good, your food has to have a social currency. There needs to be that meaning behind it. Modern traditions are about the excitement and intrigue of modernizing foods through heritage or heirloom traditional grains. And convenience without compromise. It's unwavering and it hasn't changed. People want convenience, but they're not going to compromise taste or quality or texture, flavor, any of those things. They just need it more convenient. For us, it's not about dictating what's right or wrong. It's not about good or bad. I'm not going to get into a perception debate at all. It's about choice, and our job is to satisfy that demand. Our name, Arden Mills, says it all. We have an intense passion about what we do, but a whole lot of passion without a good business strategy is not a good recipe for success. And so we listen to the market. We've informed ourselves better. We've talked to many customers, many of the growers, many of the people we do business with, and we created a new business platform for us to bring all these new grains to life, and we call it the Annex by Arden Mills. So why did we create the Annex by Arden Mills? Have I said enough that the behaviors are changing? Things are changing in the marketplace. The grains and the expectations are evolving. Our business in white flour and what we do is a tons of us business. Sometimes it's a very big ship with a very small rudder. It's tough to turn it. And we had to create a segment of our business that kept pace with the change of the environment today. And that's why we set up the Annex by Arden Mills. We must focus on these growth markets. We must think and act differently in the marketplace. We dedicated this separate team to connect with the entrepreneur, the chef, the visionary, the product development, the marketing. It's not only about the grains, it's the format as well. We need to be able to meet our customers with the grains they would like in a form they want. To give you an idea, puffed, pearled, flaked, IQF'd, clean berries, gluten-containing, gluten-free mixes, and even colors in their grains is all the things we're focusing on with the Annex today. The Annex was created to create food, not sell grain ingredients. We have to understand that and think differently. And so my challenge to everybody as I wrap up is I want you to challenge the status quo when it comes to grains and the formats in which we eat it. Keep dreaming. Keep pushing Arden Mills. Arden Mills and the Annex by Arden Mills will be there to find a solution for your needs. Thank you very much.
All right, thank you so much, Bill. Really unlocking what a company like Arden Mills can do in the terms of food safety, education, access. Really great insight. Next speaker and last speaker before our very brief panel. We've just had so much good information coming, so we're going to need to shorten our panel. But we've got Sarah Burnett. She's the Vice President of Wellness and Food Policy at Panera Bread, where she's responsible for the policies that shape the company's perspective and commitments on food issues. Prior to this role, Sarah worked for more than a decade on the Panera Quality Assurance team, overseeing special projects including the creation and implementation of the company's Raised Without Antibiotics program, the animal welfare standards, and their 2014 food policy. Before joining Panera in 2005, she worked with Ecolab's Food Safety Division. Please join me in welcoming Sarah Burnett.
Thank you very much. Good morning, everyone. I'm going to give you, and I'm very honored to be able to talk to you a little bit about, from the retail and the food service perspective, how we approach carbohydrates. And of course, they asked me to come and speak to you today because, but I promise you I'm not going to speak just about bread, because when we think about sustainable carbs, and when I think about sustainability, I think that big S, which is about people, planet, and community. We think about much more beyond just flour, just bread. And so, just for context, very quickly, letting you know, if you are one of the people who happen to live in one of the states we don't operate, we have 2,300 bakery cafes nationwide. Soup, salad, sandwiches, our wheelhouse, and we operate in 46 states and Canada. So we have a wide swath, but really we're driven by our core values, which is about real food, real options, real information, with really our guests at the center of all of our work. And it's been a really long journey. So I would say for you, I've been with Panera for 15 years, and I've been very blessed in that time. But we've been around since 1987. Very similar concept to what we are today, but what our customer needs were and the menu that we had there was very, very different in 1987 than it was today. And we've had some big milestones along the way. I'm not going to drain it. I'm going to say it's been everything from Raised Without Antibiotic Chicken all the way back in 2004 to actually beverage labeling in 2017 when we chose to label added sugar as well as calories at the point of pour for beverages. Again, getting into kind of the carbohydrate sugar conversation. I'm going to take you through 5 key areas when we think about approaching carbohydrates and how we continue to innovate in our own menu. And I hope that this will help you in your own operations as you think about, especially at scale. I was really inspired by Liz's descriptions of fine dining, but talk to you a little bit about kind of how we do this at scale. One is actually the one that we naturally gravitate to here, which is whole grains. And thinking about how do we get really tasty whole grain options on menus. And it's not about having that one thing that's on the side of, oh yeah, we have a whole grain roll or a whole grain bun over here. You can have it if you really want to add that. Versus saying, how do we actually put that as the center of our plate and get people excited about it. We launched a really awesome sourdough whole grain last year. We have a regular whole grain loaf, which is really tasty, but we knew that people were looking for a new flavor profile. The sourdough whole grain does incredibly well for us, and it's just a tastier version of whole grain that is much more approachable for a lot of consumers. Looking at whole grains from a sense of equality, of saying it's not any more costly for you, so making sure that price is equitable. Looking at defaults and changing defaults on menus. How many sandwiches can you actually default on a whole grain bread? And move people in that direction. We've done it with our kids' menu really successfully over several years. And then labeling. So I think Bob gave a little bit of voice to this, but actually labeling whole grain. We started doing whole grain percentages as well as servings of whole grain on all of our breads last year. It's been really great for our customer and actually shifting some behavior. The second thing that I'm going to talk about here is novel and ancient grains, which I think we saw some of these interesting flours, but I think that this goes much more beyond just bread. So thinking about non-traditional applications, for us that means buckwheat soba noodles in an Asian-inspired dish. That means also moving into categories where maybe grains might not be the norm. And we push a little bit, as kind of a ubiquitous brand into things like an ancient grain blend of freekeh and farro and barley on our ancient grain and arugula salad. Really kind of pushing the edges, but using some really interesting, tasty, flavorful ingredients. And then lastly, I would say stealth health, so seeding things. There is some definite merit to seeding this. Our artisan ciabatta, a traditional ciabatta, does not have whole grains in it. Ours has 7% sprouted grain. It performs really well for us. And our goal and our objective would be to continue to increase that over time as we bring that customer on a kind of a lifetime journey with us. And then the next area that I'll talk about just really briefly is fruit and veg. So this is one thing that I don't think any of us could ever debate about, which is my favorite slide, because everybody will debate bread, but when we get to fruit and veg, it's really simple principles. And I actually take this inspiration from one of my QSR counterparts that I was talking the other day with. And they said, The reality is, in an traditional American diet, some consumers, the lettuce and the tomato that's on their sandwich is the only vegetables they're going to get today. And so we really have to think about how do we actually increase acceptance of those and just put more on the menu. I think we also need to end this debate about fresh versus frozen. We are really blessed. We get fresh produce delivery 7 days a week in all of our locations. We understand that that is something that most concepts don't have. But we also tend to leverage things, frozen ingredients, fire roasted edamame, and some of these that are really great frozen, and they're a great way to add more fruit and veg and creative fruit and veg throughout the year into your pantry. And then lastly, just focusing on plate proportions. I think we all know, but I think sometimes we miss out on the basics and kind of forget about those. And then I can't miss talking about sweets. When you walk into our bakery cafe, you see a huge display of baked goods. Interestingly enough, it's a small percentage of our sales. But what we do know is that consumers are still looking for a sweet treat. And for us, really how we continue to innovate in this space is especially playing with portion size. And the example and the fact I'll give you is we launched a brand new bakery platform in January of this year. A lot of our bakery items are new. You'll see some awesome cherry cheese Brittany's, different cinnamon rolls, and it looks all very tasty. What people don't know and what we're probably not going to scream to consumers is actually with kind of innovating and creating some more flavorful and bountiful looking products, we actually reduced portion size by 1/2 ounce on average across the portfolio, which meant 42 calories on average we decreased, 3 grams of added sugar, 6 grams of carbs that we reduced in that portfolio with customers who are still really satisfied and still get the treat that they're looking for. And then lastly, I can't leave out beverages. We all know sugar-sweetened beverages are still the #1 source of added sugar in our diet as Americans in general. And this is something that we take very seriously and try to figure out how do we actually drive guests. And it's not about soda is evil. It's actually about how do we drive people from a full-calorie beverage down to a moderately lightly to unsweetened beverage. And for us, how we approached this in 2017, and we've seen kind of consistent year over year now, is we said we have to approach this by options as an alternative. And then we also have to provide information to actually drive consumer behavior. So what we did is we launched 6 new beverages, all, again, moderately sweetened to unsweetened. We also added, at the point of pour and on our cup, we label added sugar and calories. What we've seen was really interesting. So people aren't buying beverages less. They're not scared of beverages. What we're seeing, though, is an 8% shift in consumption down that sweetness scale. Right now, what we're tracking at is we save about 1 million cups of added sugar a year just by labeling and providing a few new options. And this is something that's really exciting for us. We know there's plenty of novel and interesting ways to go after this, but it's being successful for us as a brand. And then lastly, I would just say everybody has a really unique journey. And I think that at this conference, and I've been very fortunate to be here for several years, is that we're all on unique journeys, but we all actually have a really great responsibility. And it's all the same responsibility, which is how do we leverage our brands? How do we leverage our voices to actually shift consumers in the right direction, and all the while leading with taste? And so everything that I've presented today, I think, was really successful because we led with great tasting products that people wanted to eat. And that is led to some great success for us. Thank you all very much.
Okay, great. Thank you so much, Sarah. You know, we have had the opportunity to hear 4 different perspectives: company owner, operator, journalist, and leader in the milling industry. 4 very unique perspectives. We've had a lot of content and information, but I'd like to invite our speakers up to the stage now for a very brief modified panel. I've got a few questions for them. We won't have time to take any questions for the audience, but our panelists will be around and available after the session to have some conversations. So if everybody can take a seat. Okay, great. So Liz, I'm going to start with you. Quick question. What are the biggest challenges chefs face when it comes to using whole grain flours in their recipes and also showcasing them on the menu? You did a beautiful job exploring and showcasing so many of the wonderful whole grains that are being used, but what are the challenges that they face?
Yeah, so I think like technically for chefs, as I kind of mentioned, it's the struggle of really achieving the crusts, the pasta, al dente textures with sort of subbing out some of the AP and incorporating these wholesome sort of whole grain flours. So I think just, as I said, experimenting with different additions of ingredients, whether it's soda water, I think really they just are still struggling with trying to get that pizza crust and really being able to say, I have a gluten-free pizza that a customer will then remember and come back and say, oh my God, I had an amazing gluten-free pizza. Like he actually cracked the code on that. So that seems to be the biggest challenge for chefs is just what combination works, what additions work. And then I think as far as a menu, while it really depends, you know, someone might see a buckwheat pancake or a buckwheat biscuit on a brunch menu and be like, oh, that's gonna taste like dirt or cardboard or, you know, and trying to, change the perception like, you know, it does have some other flours in it and just give it a try. And I think there might be a little bit, while some people might be intrigued by that and be like, oh, it's like a slightly healthier pancake, I think just, showing that it can still taste good. I saw a pork chop on a menu at a restaurant in Chicago and it just said Egyptian heirloom grains as like a garnish on the pork chop. And it was just this little, but everything else about it was southern and delicious. But how do you sort of incorporate, maybe someone doesn't know what an Egyptian heirloom grain is, but they might give it a try.
Great.
Yeah.
I love what you're doing with your publication. I
Thank
think
you.
really being able to showcase and help chefs and the industry beyond really learn a lot more and become inspired by the whole grain movement. So Bob, question for you. If you were going to serve a guest one brilliant whole grain preparation to a chef to have them say, okay, I get it now, what would that be?
Well, I think it's basic. I think people eat bread, people eat pizza, and they have an expectation of white bread and they have an expectation of white pizza. And so if you have a whole grain wheat pizza, I think pizza is a really good example, that delivers everything that you expect from white bread, plus that it has flavor, but it has the same texture. And I'm a wheat advocate, and I think that fundamentally we have an infrastructure for wheat. It's there. It's so useful in so many ways that that's where the thing should turn. That we should really be focusing on creating food that people expect and eat commonly, and just make it a little bit better, making it with whole grain.
Very good. I want you to know I received a compliment about your presentation backstage. A gentleman said in all of his years, he had not heard a presentation that had so much passion and so much knowledge and interest behind it. So compliments to you. I think we can call you the whole grains passionista.
Thanks. I think we're going to make wheat great again.
Okay, let me ask you, Bill, can you speak to the larger ecosystem of grains? We talk about seed banks, farmers, distributors, and others. What is Ardent Mills doing to cultivate the whole grain community? And do you involve consumers in that community?
So from the world of seed banks and all that, we work closely. I think as people are incorporating more and more whole grains in general to the diets, there's various grains that have flavor, texture, or functionality that maybe historically we didn't know about, and we can bring those seeds back into production. So we do work closely with seed banks to identify characteristics or traits that maybe our customers or consumers are looking for. We do work closely, as I presented through the presentation, with the grower. It's great you have a seed bank, but you can't do anything without the grower or the farmer. And so through our network and our relationship with the farmers, we work intensely with them. I think it's important when you bring these heirloom grains or different varieties of wheat to life, that you've had commercial success because the grower is looking for not a flash in the pan. I don't want to grow it one year and then next year, what do I do next? You have to think long-term about how do you bring some of these grains to life. We do seek feedback from the consumer and our customers, and we also have our own consumer insights group. So, sometimes when you ask the consumer what do you want, they're going to tell you they want the buggy whip and the cars right around the corner. And so not only do we talk to the consumer, we're also trying to predict what the demand may be or the shifts around the trends may be through our own research as well. So we attack a lot of these things in different ways.
That's great. Again, I think you really brought to light the importance of what large companies can do and the value around, again, food safety, cultivating these communities, sharing the nutrition education that you offer to kids.
Yep. Scale by itself doesn't really mean anything unless you do something with it. And we found a way to be big but act small.
That's great. Thank you for that. And Sarah, question for you. What's the most effective strategy you've seen implemented on work that you've done or others to curb excess sugar, refined carbohydrate consumption?
So I think that probably the most successful program that we've personally launched our added sugar initiative with our beverages that I shared on stage. And I would also say that combined with interesting different communication vehicles, really leveraging marketing to get consumers excited about food policy and wellness. So I think, Bill gave a nod to social influencers. We did a great series last year called Food Interrupted. It was a digital content series, and it was actually focused less on Panera and very much focused on food issues, whole grains being one of those. It was a great vehicle for us to educate consumers around kind of why whole grains taste great and why they're better for you without saying, whole grains are great for you, they're wonderful, they taste delicious, go buy a sandwich. We actually disconnected those two messages, and I think that was really powerful for us to engage our consumers in a different way, in a way that wasn't true advertising. And we've seen as a result a lot of engagement and different purchase behaviors as a result.
Super, great. So let me open a question up to each of you. What kind of innovation is needed from chefs and suppliers to make whole grains more acceptable to the consumer? Any one of you want to take that one?
I would say just...
That's okay. We can give you all a chance.
Okay.
Go ahead, Sarah.
I would actually just say that at least in the scale marketplace, it's actually just about more options. And I think whether that be beverages or on the grain side, still when you actually look at menus and map that out, there is a big disparity between a true 100% refined product and things that are offering kind of better nutrition. And it's about growing those options to get it in more people's mouths. That's really, I think, the challenge at scale.
I think it's about leadership. I think that chefs, I think it's about leadership. I think chefs have who are really passionate and have great palates and who serve great food and know why they want to do something and can put it out there. They're the ones who will lead the way. And I'm old, and I'm not so convinced that diversity, that lots of choices is right. I think focus is good, or maybe it's a combination of both. But I think people don't go to the store and buy 20 things. They go to the store and buy one thing, and then they have that tomorrow, and they like it, and it's been accepted within their family, and everybody likes it, and that's sort of the way they go. And so the question is, who's going to provide that leadership? Who's going to actually say, well, this is great? And I think people respond to leaders.
Agreed. Liz or Bill?
Yeah, I mean, I think about what Alex Boaz is doing. As I mentioned, he has basically a CSA for grains, and every month, letting consumers sort of sign up for this. And again, just the chefs kind of spreading that knowledge, letting them know, there's growing interest in where all of our food is coming from consumers. But do they think about the grains? Do they think about, sort of adding that to the mix? So I think things like a grain share where, they're coming in for courses with him and trying the item and going home and cooking and baking with the flours and the grains is a great way just to just continue to promote education among consumers who, maybe are just starting to think about where's my grain coming from.
Yeah, I think it's dreaming about the form of the product. We're excited about our IQF grains. They're whole berries that are ready to go. It's an easier method for the chefs when they're in the restaurants to incorporate whole grains. As another example is we're putting our high fiber barley in rice down in Puerto Rico. And it's another way to incorporate more whole grains into the diet. So I think it's more dream about the form or the function of these whole grains, and we as a milling company are there to help dream with you because we have to encourage more incorporation of whole grain as we go forward. So, it's really up to all of us to find new and different ways to get there, to continue the evolution of whole grain incorporation into our diet.
It's great, and I think it's a great way to end. Really, just recognition to each of you for the contribution that you bring to really elevating whole grains as an important part of a balanced and healthy diet. So can I ask for a round of applause for our panelists? Thank you. Well done.
Thank you so much, Chavanne, and thank you to all of our panelists. So we have a break right now, but before we go to the break, I'm going to ask you to stay in your seats for just a minute longer while I go through a few housekeeping announcements. We're going to be going to a break, and then we're going to breakout sessions, and then from your breakout sessions, you're going to be going to lunch, and we have a bento box lunch pickup, which is going to be happening in the Beverage Garden Plaza, which is just outside the Marriott Pavilion. As you come out of this building and you go towards the left, it's that plaza over there. Those lunches are going to be ready to pick up at 12:15, and you can enjoy your lunch indoors or outdoors. We'll have some areas set up for you there. Please do note, if you ordered a special lunch when you were registering, it's noted on the back of your badge, and we have actually made specific special lunches for all of you. So please don't let that hard work go to waste. If you do see a special lunch on the back of your badge, you can ask the people who are handing out the box lunches, let them know that you have that special lunch, and they'll get that for you. For breakout sessions, we've got the refreshment and network break going on downstairs first, and then at 10:45 is when the breakout sessions start. And if you are new to the campus, we do have them somewhat spread out around the campus. So I wanted to take a moment to pull up a slide and let you know where you're going. So this is a map of the campus, as you'll see. In the red circle is where we are now in the Marriott Pavilion. And again, also the breakout session that you registered for is on the back of your badge. If you're in A1, you're going to Danny K. Theater, which is here. And I'll note also, you don't need to memorize this map right now. We will have wayfinders outside, but just to give you a general direction, a general sense of which direction you're headed in. So if you're in A1, you're going to Danny K. Vader. If you're in A2, you're going to be headed to the Admission Center and the Ecolab Theater within the Admission Center. Note, this theater we're in now is also the Ecolab Auditorium, but we're in the Marriott Center. So you're actually headed to the Admission Center instead if you're in A2. If you're in A3 or A4, you've lucked out. You're right here in this building. You're actually downstairs in the classrooms downstairs, so that's very simple for you. If you're in A5, you're going to be in Anheuser-Busch Theater, which is in Roth Hall. Roth Hall is the main sort of iconic campus building on campus, so you're going to be in the Anheuser-Busch Theater there. And then finally, if you're in A6, you're going to be in the Multipurpose Room West, which is in the Student Commons. If you've been down to the Egg, that's where you're headed. You're going down to the Egg, and it's just off the building there. Again, don't be too intimidated. We have lots of people who are around who are going to be helping you, but just wanted to give you a quick visual of where you are headed for your breakout sessions. Now, I'd like to invite you to join the break, enjoy some refreshments and some networking downstairs. Our networking break is sponsored by Rich products. After lunch, we'll see you back here at 1:15. Thanks very much, everyone.
This is a recipe for beet tartare with a quick cured egg, a modern take on an old classic. Combine the fish sauce, Worcestershire sauce, oyster sauce, honey, hot sauce, garlic cloves, and ground mustard. Gently place the yolks in the marinade. Cover and marinate in the refrigerator for 12 to 24 hours. These beets have been roasted, peeled, and diced. Combine the beets with the mayonnaise, Tabasco sauce, cornichons, capers, and scallions, and toss gently to combine. Season to taste and hold refrigerated. Add a small amount of oil to a cast iron pan. Cut the peeled shallots in half and sear flat side down until they begin to caramelize. Set aside. To plate, use a round cutter to form the beet tartare. Place an egg yolk in the middle. Garnish with bruleed shallots, radishes, asparagus spears, dill tops, and microgreens. Finish with dots of Hellmann's real mayonnaise. Here's our beet tartare with quick cured egg. Enjoy!
Here's a great way to put produce at the center of the plate in the middle of winter. Watermelon is available year-round, and because it's a member of the gourd family, it lends itself very well to pairing with other winter vegetables. In this recipe, I'm going to use the watermelon rind and pair it with some global flavors and some spice. This is a watermelon rind massaman curry with winter vegetables. To start the curry, heat the oil in a saucepan over moderate heat. Then add the garlic and the shallots and stir until it's fragrant. Add the curry paste and the chili paste or the chili flakes and stir it for about 10 seconds. Remove half a cup of the top of the creamy layer of the coconut milk and add that to the pan. Stir and cook until the paste is bubbly and the oil begins to separate. Add the remaining coconut milk, soy sauce, onions, and watermelon rind. Reduce the heat and simmer until the onions and the watermelon rind are soft. Add the remaining vegetables in the water and cook for another 4 to 5 minutes. Adjust the seasoning with fish sauce, sugar, and lime juice. Next, add the kaffir lime leaves and the basil and serve immediately over jasmine rice. This easy dish is full of warm Indian spices that will be sure to have you enjoying watermelon all year long.
This dish is a fun take on a classic gratiné, hollandaise crusted cauliflower, seasoned with cheese and mustards. Cut the cauliflower into florets, then toss the florets in a mixing bowl with oil, hot sauce, thyme, garlic. Place on a sheet pan lined with parchment paper and roast at a 425-degree oven until the florets begin to turn golden brown, about 15 to 20 minutes. Remove and set aside. Meanwhile, combine the panko, parsley, lemon zest, and cheeses, then season with the salt and pepper. Combine the Knorr liquid hollandaise sauce with the grainy and Dijon mustards. Place the roasted cauliflower in a preheated cast iron pan, top with the hollandaise sauce, and sprinkle with the breadcrumb mixture. Roast for another 10 minutes or until the breadcrumbs are golden brown. Here is the finished dish. Enjoy.
If you find yourself throwing away watermelon rind, please don't. I'm going to show you how to candy it, and this is a recipe that you can make throughout the year since watermelon is available year-round. I'm going to cut the watermelon rind by removing the green peel and all of the flesh from the inside, then cut it into 3-inch by 1/4-inch pieces. I mix the salt with the water and I soak the rind overnight at room temperature. Drain the rind, rinse it well, and then cook it in fresh water until it's tender, which should take about 5 minutes. Drain it and set aside. Next, I'm going to put the vinegar and the spices and sugar into a pot and boil it for 5 minutes. I'll add the rind and then boil this until the rind is clear. I remove it from the heat and let it stand at room temperature until it's cool. After I drain the rind, I'm going to place it onto a sugar-coated pan and cover it with more sugar. Let this set out for a day at room temperature uncovered. Next day, shake off all the excess sugar and store it in an airtight container for up to 2 weeks. You can use the rind as a garnish. Dip it into chocolate for a sweet, sour, and salty snack, or you can use it as a garnish for cakes, tarts, cupcakes, and cookies.
This is a light, refreshing dish featuring sustainable seafood, Alaskan black cod with a grapefruit relish and an avocado cream. In a bowl, whisk together the grapefruit juice, soy sauce, mirin, miso paste, and the cod fillets for up to 30 minutes. For the relish, char the jalapeno over an open flame. Once cooled, seed and mince. Combine with the diced grapefruit segments, scallions, sugar, red wine vinegar, and olive oil. Season to taste and refrigerate until ready to use. To make the avocado cream, combine the avocado, garlic, yogurt, Hellmann's light mayonnaise, chili, and lime juice in a blender. Blend until smooth. Heat oil in a non-stick sauté pan over medium heat. Pan-sear the cod until opaque and beginning to caramelize. To avocado cream on the bottom of the plate. Top with the fish and the grapefruit relish. Garnish with microgreens. Here's our finished dish. I hope you enjoy.
Here's a recipe that's sure to impress your guests. I've used 2 types of watermelon in this recipe, both red and yellow. Yellow watermelon tends to be a little bit sweeter than red watermelon and creates. I've also used watermelon juice to create an interesting dressing. You can make this recipe a day ahead. So let's make our watermelon and avocado mosaic with Dungeness crab salad. Place the watermelon into a blender and blend until smooth. Let this juice sit refrigerated for 1 to 2 hours until the solids have settled to the bottom. You want to decant the clear liquid from the top, leaving the solids behind. Next, you'll want to take the decanted watermelon juice, the gelatin, the lemon juice, and the salt, and bring this to a simmer until the gelatin is melted. You may want to skim as necessary. Next, we'll make the mosaic. Place a piece of plastic wrap at the bottom of a mold. you may use some spray or some water to hold the plastic in place. I'm going to alternate pieces of the red and yellow watermelon along with the avocado inside the mold, leaving a little bit of space in between each piece. Next, I'm going to pour the gelatin over the mold, making sure to barely cover the watermelon and the avocado. Place this into the refrigerator to chill and let it set for an hour. To make the crab salad, gently squeeze the crab meat to remove any excess moisture that might remain. Place the crab meat, the lemon zest, the mayonnaise, creme fraiche, and chives into a mixing bowl and gently toss this together until combined. To plate the salad, remove the mosaic from the refrigerator and then remove it from the mold and place it on your serving dish. If desired, heat a spoon or the edge of a knife and smooth the edges of the mosaic. To finish the dish, I'm going to place the crab salad on top of the mosaic and garnish with microgreens. I hope you'll find this watermelon and avocado mosaic with Dungeness crab salad visually appealing and fun to make.
Here is a dish with spiralized sweet potatoes, clams, and a creamy Asian turmeric sauce. Using a spiralizer, sterilize the sweet potatoes into long, thick noodles. Cook the sweet potatoes in boiling about a minute or two, drain and set aside. Heat the vegetable oil in a wok over medium-low heat, add the sweet potato noodles, stir frequently and cook just until tender. Remove from the wok and set aside. In the same wok, add a little oil, add the clams, turn the heat to medium, add the garlic, ginger, and chopped chili pepper. Add coconut milk and Knorr Professional liquid concentrate base. Add turmeric and fresh lime juice. Cook until the clams are open, remove, and then set aside. Reduce the broth until it's thick enough to coat a spoon, and season to taste. Add the noodles back into the sauce, toss gently, and then add the clams to combine well. Place the noodles and the clams on a plate, sprinkle with Fehribach, cilantro, and sprouts. Garnish with lime. So here is the finished dish. Enjoy.
If you find yourself with an excess of watermelon, turn it into discovering fermented beverages these days. And here's a delicious recipe for making a watermelon shrub. Heat the sugar and vinegar on the stove, stirring constantly until the sugar is dissolved. Add the watermelon and simmer to release its juices and flavors into the syrup. Cool the mixture and strain out any solids. Add water to taste. Place the mixture into a glass jar and allow it to rest in the refrigerator for 4 days covered. This can be blended with alcohol or other flavors of your choosing to make a delicious beverage. So here's our watermelon shrub. I've garnished it with a watermelon wedge and candied watermelon rind.